Welcome, everyone. Today, this is Oracle Apex Office Hours, and this is part 5 of our 5-part series regarding what's new in Oracle Apex 23.2. It was a preview, but as of this week, great news, Oracle Apex 23.2 is now available. So everyone hopefully knows this already, thanks to social media, thanks to all the different ways that we've been trying to make everyone aware. But yes, Apex 23.2 is now available. It's available today for you to use on apex.oracle.com, obviously. But more importantly, from there, for everyone else that might be interested on Autonomous, is Apex 23.2 is rolling out to Autonomous Database and Apex Service customers around the world. It may take several days to reach all cloud regions, so check for status updates on the URL you see there, apex.oracle.com/go/ADB updates. So that was the real exciting part. I kind of jumped the gun. Everyone should probably know me by now. I am Jason Haynes, and I'm your host today. We're going to have a couple special guests talk about a bunch of new features. But before we get to that, we have all kinds of new content that's been published thanks to the 23.2 general availability and release. You can see there from that list. I won't list them all, but if you go to apex.oracle.com/blog, you'll be able to see all these blogs and start learning about all these new features. There's just a tremendous amount of information here, and it's probably going to take you quite a while to get through it all, and that's okay. There's no rush to any of this. We're just really excited to talk about more of these features. We also have playlists on our YouTube channel. So we've got the new features playlist defined, the URLs there. And we also have a couple of the previous the 5-part series we're doing right now. We have a couple of them already published, and the others, as they get finished being edited, will also be published over here in the next few days. This 5th one will probably be available next week, just so you know. But always, every Apex Office Hours we record, and then we try to get them edited up and published as soon as possible. But in terms of this 5-part series for the preview 23.2, we wanted to wait until the general availability of Apex 23.2 before making those other recordings available. So again, today is part 5 of the 5-part series. This is what we've been doing over basically the last month or so. We're going to have other standard Apex Office Hours coming up, but this has been a special edition of the 23.2 new features Office Hours that we've been doing in bulk every week. We have a whole bunch of events going on currently. This week in the UK, we have the UK Oracle Users Group Conference for 23. Coming up on, I guess, next week, we have the German DOAG 2023 conference and exhibition. And on the week of December 5th, the Business Innovations with Oracle Apex. So we're going to have another Office Hours-ish type of setup like this, where we're going to have some more Apex customers talk about their success and their journey using Apex in their organization. So if you go to that URL there for the events application that Monica was so kind to put together, you'll be able to keep track of what events have to do with Apex coming up, and especially for some of those that might be in your region. So it's worth keeping up with that particular application, subscribing to notifications, so that you're made aware of anything that gets published. It is all identified by region, and if you know of any Apex events going on in your region that we don't have there, you can submit your event and we'll make sure it gets published if it has anything to do with Apex. So today, part 5, what's new in Oracle Apex 23.2. We're going to talk about UT Enhancements, which is the universal theme, the new feature for uploading an image and what can go on there out of the box in Apex, static application files and object storage, and REST source catalogs from OpenAI. So it's 4 different topics. And to get us started, we have Paige Hansen. She's going to talk about UT Enhancements and upload image. So I'm going to switch it over to Paige, and then we'll come back a little bit later for our second presenter. Paige, over to you.
Thank you, Jason. Hi, everyone. My name is Paige Hansen, and I'm going to be talking about some universal theme updates and enhancements. And I'm going to build a couple builder enhancements in there as well. And then I'll jump into the image upload feature in 23.2. So before we get too far into the universal theme updates, one builder update that I want to highlight is our new Create app, simplified Create app wizard. And so what we've tried to do is we've tried to simplify the process of creating applications to make creating something like a demo app or a test app super easy, only takes a couple clicks. And so I want to show you guys how that works first, in case you haven't already had a chance to test it out on your own. So here I have my I'm in my Apex builder, and in order to get to that simplified create app wizard, all I have to do is click the create button in my app builder page, and this is what that new create app page looks like. So we have simplified this to still provide everyone with all the options that they had before. You can still get to the old create app wizard, the full wizard where you can add pages, set advanced features, stuff like that. You can also still create an app from a file as you could before. And then we've added in creating an app from QuickSQL, as well as easy ways to browse apps in the gallery and copy existing apps to create new apps as well. But in one click on that create button, I'm in this page. Here, all I have to do is enter a name and click the create application button, and this is going to create a bare bones application, just as if you had gone into the full wizard, not added any pages, and just clicked create right away. So instead of having to go through the full process, now it only takes a couple clicks, and that makes the process of creating just simple, very basic apps a lot easier, saves a lot of time. You don't have to go through the whole thing. So here I'm going to create my new application for Universal Theme Enhancements and click create application so that we can see what it looks like afterwards. Here I have my bare bones application. It has the global page, my home page, my login page. I haven't done anything to it except just create that simple application. We can also see another new builder update in this page right here, which is our, we have our app icon displayed with our application ID in that breadcrumb in the top of the page. So this is helpful when you have lots of apps and maybe you're using icons to identify which app is which. And so now you can easily know what app am I in. I will say that all apps created from that simplified create app wizard will have the rocket ship icon, and then it'll select a random color to be associated with that. That can always be customized in your app user interface shared components page. And so I can always update this as I want to. I'm gonna leave that as is because that's not part of this demo today. So what I want to do is I want to jump into my the updates to Universal Theme, and we're going to start with updates to template components in Universal Theme. We have a number of template components that are shipped as part of Universal Theme, such as content row and timeline, comments, stuff like that. So I'm going to use content row because there have been a number of changes to the options that everyone has to customize their content row regions. So I'm going to create a page, and I'm going to create my content row page, and I'm going to use my movies data set, and I'll create this page. And when my content row page is initially created, it just has some dummy data. So let's go ahead and update this with just a SQL query that I've written to grab some data from my movies table. And now that we have this, we can see that we have our new columns. So let's go ahead and update our region attributes so that we can see some of these new updates. So previously with content row, each of these settings attributes were just quick pick options where you could only select a column and then add a little bit of extra text to it. This has now been upgraded to a text box where you can now see a lot of what you want in there, and you can also use template directives within these attributes now. So this is new in 23.2, and honestly huge for allowing people to customize what kind of data is being displayed within their content row region. So here, let's go ahead and update my title, and I'm just going to put that here. My description, I'll just do my movie overview. And for my overline, let's just do the genre right now. We'll keep it simple. And miscellaneous, let's add our runtime, for example. And I'm just going to leave this as is and update a couple appearance items before we delve into some of those template directives that can be used within our settings attributes. So in 23.2, as part of the content row template component, we now have this new appearance attribute group where it has a couple of, like we had apply theme colors before, but now we also have this option for compact style, and we can also hide borders and remove padding. So if I just leave the settings as is and I save and run this page, I'm going to have to log in. And this is what it looks like before. We can see we have these tiny little lines breaking up our content row data. And so I can actually now hide those borders, and I can change the style to compact to fit everything into a slightly smaller space. So I'll save and run that. Now we can see we no longer have those borders, and our content is kind of condensed a little bit to make it a little bit more compact. I can also remove the padding around this content. And now we can see it takes up the full width of my page of this region. So those are a couple appearance updates. And in addition to updates to the appearance, we also have a couple new options when displaying badges. So we can now control the position of a badge and the alignment of the badge. And so if I'll display my vote average in this, just what the movie is rated. And let's select the state to be the badge state column. And now I can control my column width, my position, whether or not the badge is at the beginning or the end of the row, and how it's aligned. So I'll go ahead and use the defaults so that we can see how it changes. Right now, my badges are on the left side of the row, so they're at the start of the row. We can change this position to the end, and we can also see that alignment is on the left as well. So let's change the position to end and the alignment to center and take a look to see what that is like now. And we can see when the page reloads, my badges are now on the right side of the row and they're centered within the column. So I have this one row, the rating is 7, whereas a lot of the other ratings are 7.9 or 5.9. And so we can see that single digit rating is in the center line of all the other ratings. And similarly, we can see how if I change the alignment to end, that will update how the column is aligned as well. So a couple nice updates that you can continue to customize your content row region. Let's jump into how you can use template directives within your settings attributes. So this was not supported in 23.1. This is new in 23.2. And I think this is going to be very powerful for how you control what content gets displayed and when. So you can use the with and apply template directives. You can use case and if template directives, all to control what kind of content is in here. So in this overline attribute, I can actually use my badge template component and update this so that I'm using my with and apply to apply the theme badge template component. So here, I'll just need to update what values are being passed in. So right now, I don't want to pass in a label, so I'm going to leave that null. I want the genre to be my value, so I'll pass genre into the value. I will leave size as is, and I'll just use one of the classes that's typically used for badges, and I'll just use the T badge -- SM class. to just display this overline badge as a small badge. So what this is going to do is it's going to use my badge template component that's shipped with universal theme. It's going to display the genre of the movie within this the badge value, and it's going to be a small badge. So let's save and run this and see how this applies. So now we can see in each row, my genre has been updated to use that badge template. And within this template, I can even use my if or case template directives as well. So if I only wanted to display a label for, say, a thriller movie, then, or say I only wanted to display a movie label if there was a genre available for that movie, then I could do so here. Same with size or shape. So this has endless opportunities, and I think is a really great chance for people to play around with this and really customize their content row regions. All right, so that I believe covers the updates to template components in Universal Theme. I am going to talk a little bit about the Redwood Light theme, which has been refreshed in 23.2. And this has been done to really upgrade Redwood Light and make it look a little bit more like the overall Oracle Redwood theme that we see on a lot of Oracle branded things, and just give it a fresh new look. So in my Universal Theme Enhancements app, I am going to use my theme roller to select the Redwood Light theme, and I'll save this. And we can see that the content of the page has changed to see those updates in Redwood Light for Universal Theme. Now, I'll go to my home page, and here we can really see how pages with breadcrumbs have been upgraded so that our color bar underneath the breadcrumb region looks a lot different than it did in 23.1. So actually I have my universal theme here, universal theme sample app here. And if I change this app to Redwood Light, I can see those updates, and let's compare it to what it looked like in 23.1. And I'll have to reset my theme. And now we can see how big of a difference there is between these two apps. So that color bar has been updated, the padding and font styles, sizes, and weights have been updated. So it's just giving Redwood Light a fresh look, so that you can use this theme in a lot of your applications and make them feel new and modern and a little bit different from the typical Vita themes and Universal Theme. All right, I'm going to pause there. Jason, I don't know if there's any questions related to Universal Theme updates.
I think we're doing pretty good. Tim is keeping up with the chat and the questions are getting answered. Thank you, Paige.
Awesome. All right, so I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and we're going to move from Universal Theme updates to the image upload item, which is a brand new item in 23.2. So let me change over to my other application. And here I have my upload image item. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at how this upload image item works, and then how we can customize it in our page designer to make it look the way that we want. So I'm so sorry, my cat wants to be pet. Okay, so here I have my very simple upload image item. This is using the default settings. And so you can create a new item, add it to your page, and run your page and it's going to look exactly like this. And I don't have to customize anything in order for it to work. I can simply add this to my page, click upload image, choose the image that I want, and there it is. So that's the very, very, very simple version of it. So let's take a look at how we can customize this to have it work the way that we want, have it look a little bit better, stuff like that. So this is my upload image item. We can see that we have a number of attributes that we can use to customize this. So we can control how we display it, how we store a file that's uploaded, whether or not we want to allow cropping, resizing, all of that stuff. So there are a lot of options here, and we're not going to go through every single iteration of each option because that would take a lot of time. But let's take a look at maybe making this upload image region bigger and maybe allow some cropping or resizing. So first, let's change some display as settings. We can allow for inline file browse, block drop zone, inline drop zone. So let's use our block drop zone. And I'm going to change the title to select an image. And then I can specify any description text that I want. This is not required. So let's use the default settings here. And we can also use this capture using attribute to allow the selfie camera or main camera, if you're on mobile or something like that, to be used for this, which I think is really great. So let's save and run this to see what it looks like. And here I can see how my image upload drop zone has changed. So now I can select my image. This is that title text that I customized and used there. It's using that default description text, and I can choose an image and upload it here. So now I see a little bit more information about that image. When we use those default settings, all we saw was the uploaded image. We didn't see the title or the size of it or anything, or even this remove button. I can control where this file is stored. So right now it's just using the default type option, which is my Apex application temp files table. And that's fine, but you can also customize it to use whatever you would like. I can also choose to purge files at the end of a session or end of the request. And I can also allow multiple files if I would like. So a few options there. With this image upload item, we now support cropping, which I think is a highly demanded feature. And so if I enable this, allow cropping attribute, then I can control what size is my image going to be cropped to. So let's choose I want a square image, and let's take a look at this. I'm going to choose my image, choose a sunset, and now I can see that I can control how my image is being cropped. So I can move this around, I can reset it if I'd like. So once I choose how I want to crop my image, then I will apply this. And now I can see that my image has been cropped, and I can still see some information about that image. So I think that's really cool and really helpful, and a feature that will be used quite a bit for many different Apex applications. Finally, we have these resize options. And so you can control how you want to resize your file in terms of height, width, file size, stuff like that. So a few different options for you to control how that image is being uploaded to your application. Making sure I didn't miss anything else. We have our typical item settings that we can always use. But those are the, I think, high-level highlights of this upload image feature. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Jason, otherwise I will pass it back to you.
So a few questions are being fielded. I don't know that we can actually, I mean, I've got all kinds of questions myself. The first thing that jumped out on the page when I looked at this feature way back was, is there a way for an end user to be presented with those different sizing options? Like whether it was going to be a certain aspect ratio or not, or are we only stuck to what the developer chooses for that?
Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it's only up to the developer to choose what the end user sees. So
Okay.
everything's controlled here by, especially when it comes to cropping, right? The user doesn't have the option unless custom is an option or original is the option. The user doesn't have control over choosing which one of these options they would like.
Thank you for presenting this information. It's been great. We have some
Absolutely.
questions. They're still being answered. You might want to take a look at some of those, see if
Yep.
there's any opportunity.
And one more thing, sorry, I meant
Sure.
to say this after the universal theme updates. For all universal theme related updates and change logs, you can go to the universal theme sample application. Right now, I'm still on 23.1, but if I change to 23.2, we can see all those updates that happened in 23.2. So those refreshed Redwood Light updates, stuff for content row, a couple things for badge avatar and comments. So this is a good place to go if you want to learn a little bit more about what has changed in universal theme. And also, I'll always plug this app for if you have any questions about components or want to learn about components, stuff like that. So that's it.
No, great. Thank you so much, Paige.
Thank you.
So to everyone, yes, that was Paige Hansen showing us a little bit more about universal theme enhancements and the upload image component. If you have more questions about any of this, especially with what's coming up next, please use apex.oracle.com/forum to create new conversation around these new features. If you have a bug, please make sure you use apex.oracle.com/forum as well to discuss any opportunities for finding a bug. Moving on next, we have another special guest, Jason Straub, who's one of the oldest team members here that come to office hours regularly to talk about these new features. He still refers to Apex as Application Express. And I get to pick on Jason a little bit about this because we just were at a conference recently and he always says Application Express. And I'm trying to, get him to start saying Oracle Apex more often, but it's just a little teasing that goes on. Nothing personal intended by it. If it comes out, it might slip a little bit. And that's okay, Jason. We love having you. And Jason's going to talk about static application files in object storage, as well as REST source catalogs from OpenAPI. So over to you, Jason. Let's have this conversation about these new features.
All right, thanks, Jason. Hopefully we don't have a live counter on how many times I say that forbidden word.
No, that's all good.
So anyway, I am going to start here. And I'm going to start with storing your static application files in object storage, a new option in Apex 23.2. And then I'll go into subbing for Karsten, a frequent presenter here in office hours, and show REST source catalogs based on an OpenAPI document. So let's first start with these static application files. So right now, I just have a blank starter application. That's really nothing in it. I want to take a look, though, when I create an application, and I don't specify this myself, a logo or icon for the application that you see up here, Apex will create some images for you that are part of your application, that are static application files that are referenced within this application. Now, these static application files are all stored in the database. So if you're using a lot of images or CSS or JavaScript and making reference to those in your applications using this app files, and let's say you have many on a page, each one of those requests is going to be a round trip to the database. So that's not ideal for performance of your application. Now, we have also allowed you for quite some time to change the reference. Let me go to user interface here. Change the reference to where that app files prefix goes. So what you could do in the past, or still today, is you could type in the prefix to your CDN, for example, and then use this app files prefix and have the files come from your CDN or your web server instead of having it come from the database, which is great. So that would help with performance of your application. But the problem is it was managing those files would kind of be a black box, and you wouldn't have visibility into them here on the shared component static application files page. And you wouldn't be able to manage them, right? You could only manage them outside of Application Express. So what I want to show you today is a way that you can configure your application so that you can store your static resources that make up your application in OCI, Oracle Cloud Object Storage, but also have the secondary benefit of being able to see them right here and manage them right here, right from the same page, right with the same user interface. So let's first enable this for static application files. So the idea is, and I have my always free OCI cloud account here. I could easily upgrade to a paid account with one click, it looks like. But I have something called buckets in OCI object storage, and that's just where you're going to put your objects. And what I want to do is I want to be able to have Apex create me a new bucket in this compartment called prod, set all the settings appropriately on it, and allow me to put my static application files in that bucket. And then when I'm running my application, reference it right from here. And I'm also presenting here on apex.oracle.com, so you can do everything that I'm showing you today for free, including signing up for a free cloud account. So let's get going and edit the application definition. And there's this new tab for application file storage. And you can see I have two choices, local database or Oracle Cloud Object Storage. I don't have currently any references set up, but if I had set up one previously for a different application, I could just set it and then choose that one. So let's start from scratch and add some remote file storage. So what I would provide is a URL to the bucket. And so let me paste in a URL here and describe a little bit about it. So the URL is pretty prescriptive. It's just this object storage, your region, and then each tenancy, like when you sign up for an OCI cloud account, you'll be in a tenancy, has an object storage namespace. And so that's what's referenced here. At the end, I could reference an existing bucket, or I can have Apex create me a bucket on my behalf. If Apex is going to create that bucket, though, I need to supply what the ID of this compartment is, and you can easily get that from the Cloud Console. And hopefully we'll have either a video or a blog post on more how you get these configurations set, or where you get these pieces of information. So I say I want to create this bucket called Apex Files. That's my compartment OCID. I click Next. And great for me in this demo, I get a success message saying that the bucket was created and it was able to be accessed properly. So now you have the switch, which is defaulted to migrate files to object storage. And I could turn this off, but if I did that, then my existing static application files that I just showed you would not be moved to object storage. And if somebody ran the application at that point, they would see some broken images. So I'm going to let Apex migrate these files automatically, and I'll click Finish. So now we see that my remote file server is now set up. I'm set up for Oracle Cloud Object Storage. Everything looks great. Let's just go here and check to make sure everything looks good here. So now I'm in the Oracle Cloud looking at object storage, and I see that, yep, it did create the Apex files folder for me, and it did create all those icons that already existed for my application. So that's cool. We're all set up for this. Now let's go back to shared components and static application files. And you see the interface is exactly the same, except there's this little indicator over here that says, yep, I'm using Oracle Cloud Object Storage. And you see a couple tasks here. One is synchronize files, one's view object storage files. The reason for those tasks is that these files could be managed outside of Apex. And so Apex wouldn't know about me uploading some extra files. And so that's what these two tasks are here. But now let's go ahead and let's manage our static application files with the same interface. And let me add some files here. So let me add an images directory, and let me drop some files in here. All right, I've got 3 files. I'll click create. And it created some files for me. You can see we have our Zoom background here for our Apex Team Holiday event, which should be coming up here in the coming weeks. So if I go back to static application files, you can see the new files here, images are referenced. The other thing that I can do, just like I could do it when we were storing files in the database, is I could just specify a file name and not upload a file and just click create. And what this is going to do is create a blank file for me. And now I can use this editor here, and I can add some CSS, for example. So let me do that. Click Save Changes. Then you'll see files or files saved and minified. So let me go back to static application files, and you see that not only do I have core CSS, but I have a bonus one, a minified one. Let's just go back and check our bucket here. And let me refresh. And you can see all these files that I've been dealing with and adding are available here in object storage, or actually stored in object storage. Now, let's say I have, I don't know, Tim on the team review the CSS that I just created. And he says, boy, this is not only bad CSS, this is dangerous CSS. So you should get rid of it immediately. So of course, I can just check here and say delete checked and delete the file. So the point is managing these files using Apex and the same, interface that we're used to. So now for the last part of this, let's go ahead and use one of these files in an application. So all I have to do is copy in the reference, and let me go to this blank application and add a new region on page 1. Create this region. I'll just call it image. Oops. And just type in some HTML. Paste in that reference that I copied from this static application files page. Click OK. Let me save and run the application. And there we go. So it's not because I'm a Harry Potter fanboy that I use this image, but I went to some site about like what happened in history in this date. So on November 16th, 2001, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone was released. So that's a little bit relevant for today. Now let's go ahead and just inspect this, just so you can see that if you look at the URL, that is the URL to our bucket that we specified, that we had Apex create on our behalf. And then this existing logo as well, if we inspect, you can see that's also being referenced from object storage. So that was storing static application files in object storage. You get the best of both worlds of being able to use a web server or CDN type delivery, but also still be able to manage those within Apex itself. So let's move on to REST source catalogs from OpenAPI. And if you're familiar with REST data sources, so you can add REST data sources to your application that allows you to interact with REST APIs in your application, much like you would local database tables or local database objects. So you can, build forms and charts and reports. Instead of on local tables, you use your REST data source. So we've had for some time under Workspace Utilities, something called REST source catalog. So you would typically in your application, you'd have to discover a REST endpoint one by one. And that could come cumbersome if you're working in a development environment. Now you got to move this all to your production environment, or you want to share this with some other workspace. That's why create catalog or REST source catalogs came about, so that you could curate these REST data sources from all your applications in your workspace into one file, export them, and then give them to somebody else to import them, or import them into another instance. So what's new in 23.2, and let's first, you need to create a group. And what we're going to be working with today, which should be kind of fun, is the Spotify API. And they provide a OpenAPI document that describes all of the REST endpoints and all of the services. So first, let's create a grouping. We'll call this Spotify API. And here's what's new in 23.2. We have this new button, Create from OpenAPI. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. Now I can upload a file, which is what I'm going to do. But if there is an API out there from some other service that provides you just with a URL endpoint, we can also just use that instead of a file. But in this case, I'm going to use a file. So let me upload the file and click Next. And what it's going to do is it's going to pull information from that JSON document, some description and things like that, in order to create this catalog. One of the things that I know just from reviewing the documentation and the Getting Started guide is that the authentication is OAuth client credentials flow. So I'm going to change that slightly. And also from reviewing the documentation, I know a little bit about how pagination works. So instead of no pagination, I'm going to describe how the pagination works. So the page size parameter is called limit. And I'll just say I'm going to limit each request to 25 rows initially. And the offset parameter is just offset, which is great. So now I think I'm ready to create this. So now I have a catalog, and it looks like I have 67 services. So this is now a catalog in my workspace. Any developer in my workspace now has the ability to search this catalog, create REST data sources on them. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and use this catalog, create some REST data sources in an application, and build a quick app on it. So let me create a new application. As Paige mentioned earlier, we have a very simplified create application wizard where we can just basically do it in one click. So I'll call this Spotify Albums. So now I just have a blank application. I'm going to go to shared components and add some REST data sources, just like I would if I was discovering them one by one. But now that I have that catalog imported from OpenAPI, I have this third option to create a REST data source from the catalog. So I know that the services that I want to interact with deal with albums. And so I'm going to add get an artist's albums. And then once I have an album, I can display some tracks. So that'll be done by get an albums tracks. So let me add that. Click next. I have pre-created the Spotify OAuth credential. And again, if you have a Spotify account, you can go to this developer and then get your own set of credentials. So now I have the credentials specified. I'm going to create REST data sources. So instead of doing this, one by one, discovering each one by one from the catalog, I just quickly added 2 REST data sources to my application. Now, we should use these. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get an artist's album. That's how we're going to start. So let me go to my blank page 1 in the application. And I'm going to add a region. We'll call it albums. And let's make this a classic report for simplicity here. And so location, instead of local database, I'm going to say REST source, and I'm going to choose one of those REST sources that I just created from the catalog. So now what happens? So now you see that it took from the REST data source data profile all the columns that are available there, but it also knows what parameters are needed. And you see this one is kind of highlighted in red. That means that it is a required parameter to this service. There's also a couple of non-required parameters, include groups. I haven't quite figured out what it is yet. I know I don't need it, but I think I do need market. And I'm just going to set this to US for now. But this ID for the artist, I'm going to get that from an item. So let's create a new region. Let me move it above here. And let me call it search. That looks great. Let me create an item in here now. And let me call this artist ID. All right, now I have that item. Now I can fill out the rest of this parameter for the service and reference my item P1 artist ID. Another thing I know just by working with this API is it doesn't, since this is a required parameter, we definitely don't want to show this region until that item has a value. So we're going to say item is not null, and we're going to choose our only item here. So now this region won't show unless we supply an artist ID. And then a quick way, I guess, to get that to refresh is we can add a dynamic action to this item so that when we change the item, we can refresh the region. So I'll change this to a refresh, and I will choose P1 artist ID. One last thing I know I want to do is there's a bunch of columns that are available here. Some of them don't really make sense, but I know which ones are the most interesting. So I'm going to put ID first, and then I'm going to put the name of the album next. Total tracks, I think, is good. Available markets, I really don't care about. Images, though, this will be nice. I do care about. So let me move that up. Now, the rest of these, I can just simply select them all and then make them hidden. Hidden column. There we go. So I think I have everything I need now on this page. So let me go ahead and run this. And so it's waiting for me to supply an artist ID before it shows that albums report. And the artist ID is the Spotify artist ID. It's kind of a cryptic ID, but you can easily Google for them. So I have a couple here that I'm going to try out and start with. So I enter the artist ID. It's going to call out to the web service or the Spotify URL endpoint to get the albums. And then my albums report will display based on that. And so based on the name of the album, some of you may already know who the artist is, but to make it clear, what would spruce up this application a little bit is if you notice under the images column, it's not a direct URL to an image, right? It's a JSON document giving us 3 choices for images. And so I don't think I want to display the smallest one because we want to be able to see it, but I think I like this medium one, which looks like it's the second one in the position. So what we can do is we can modify the data profile a little bit so that we pull out just the URL to the image, and then we could change this column to use that URL to display an image. So let me show you how to do that. So I'll go back to the builder and my application, and I'll go to shared components, and I will go to REST data sources. And then that REST data source was called get an artist album. So I click to edit that, and then there's a button to edit the data profile, which is basically all of the elements returned from the response and how to access them. So you see here we have images. I'm just going to modify images a bit. And I'm going to change the name, and I'll call it image 2 for now, because we're going to get the second one, the second image, as I mentioned. And I'm going to just change this to a varchar instead of a JSON document. And I am going to just change the selector a bit so it selects that particular URL out of that JSON document. And of course, if I want the second image, I reference 1 because it starts at 0, I guess, right? So let me apply the changes here. And let me go back to page 1 of my application. The first thing I need to do is for the columns, I don't see that new column right away. What I have to do is I have to go ahead and, under columns, I have to go ahead and say synchronize columns. And when I do that, you can see that there's this new column, image 2. Let me move that right here under total tracks. And now let me make some changes to this column so that it displays the image instead of just displaying the URL. So I can do that with this column formatting HTML expression. So I could say image, and then the name of the column, and I'll have an image tag there. So that's great. One last thing I need to do though is set the column attribute to not escape special characters because we actually want the HTML to display. So now let me make that change, save and run the page. And the next time we run this, we should see the images. So now you probably have a better idea of who this artist ID is. And it is Travis Kelce's girlfriend, of course. But let me show another artist just for fun. And I kind of like this artist, and they kind of have cool album art. Oops, I pasted too much in, but as you may have guessed, it's a band called Fish. And it's reaching out now and getting the documents back, or the document back for Fish. And now you can see information about the albums for Fish. One thing about Fish, they have so many live albums, we're going to need to paginate. Remember, I set up that pagination earlier. I described how pagination worked. So we can easily paginate through the result sets back and forth, and everything's good. So there's one last thing that I want to do, and that is we have this album ID. As you recall, we also added a second data source that we picked from the catalog that was get the album's tracks by the ID. So let's add that to our application. We're going to want a link from the ID to another page that's going to show us a report based on that second data source. So let me go back to Page Designer here and quickly create a page. This will also be a classic report, and we'll call it album tracks, for example. And it's going to be a REST data source, not from the local database. And let's pick get an album's tracks. All right, everything looks good there. Let's just create the page. And let's look at, we've got a bunch of columns here. So we're going to do the same thing and massage the columns to make the report a little bit better, look better on the screen. But now we have parameters. So for market, I'm going to make it a static value again for US. And for ID, let's base this on an item. So let's create a hidden item here. So I go to create page item, and we'll call this album ID. And then for ID, we'll change that from static value to item. Let's choose album ID. That looks good. Okay, let's clean up some of these columns again. So let's look at the name. We'll set that up there. Actually, track number probably should be the first, I would say. So track number, name, and then let's look at duration. And let's say that for this simple app, that's all we're interested in. So we will, just like the other report, we'll make these all hidden. And I'll save this page. So I think we have all the infrastructure together. Now, the last thing we need to do is hook up the link. So we go back to my columns on page 1 showing the albums. I go to the ID column, and instead of plain text, I could say this is a link. And then I could simply define the link to go to page 2. That was a page we just created. When we go there, we want to populate album ID, and we want to populate it with this current column ID. So let's make those changes, save it and run. So now the next time we run this page, the ID column should now all be links. So it is, and that's great. So now when I click on the link, it's going to take me to page 2. Page 2 is going to call out to that second data source of the Spotify API, and it's going to display the album tracks. And there we have it. So there you have it. That's how easy it is. A developer convenience to create REST data sources in your application from a catalog, but not only using the catalog, but creating the catalog based on OpenAPI that we get from the service provider. And I believe that's all I wanted to show today. And you can let me know if there are some questions in the chat. Thank you.
Some people asked about the buckets, whether the buckets need to be public to work with the demo you showed earlier. And also, is it a feature that only works if Apex is running in OCI, or can Apex be running anywhere as long as your bucket is in OCI?
Yeah, that's two good questions. I'll take the second one first. It can run anywhere. The way we've implemented it is that it's not reliant on anything in OCI infrastructure like DBMS Cloud or the OCI API. We just implemented it with straight web service requests. The second question is, can the bucket, so if Apex creates the bucket on your behalf, it's always going to make it public because it's assuming that you just kind of want it as a web server, right, to serve your static files. However, there are some cases where you don't want that. And that's why I have this example here where this is a private bucket. What will happen is Apex will warn you and say, hey, this bucket is not visible, so it may not work when you reference this as you expect. But what you could do then is you could use it to manage all your files in there. It's still private, but when you reference it in your application, what you would have to do is change that app files prefix. So it's going to change the app files prefix to like a pre-authenticated URL that points to that bucket. So good question. Any others you see in the chat?
There are. Steve, you want to answer those other questions?
So someone was asking whether the images could be protected. I think you just partially covered that in your answer. And you explained about the public bucket and the private bucket. So I think otherwise we've answered all the other questions. Someone did ask a question about your the cloud OpenAPI. Would that work with Fusion applications? And that should work. They have a URL. The normal /describe URL can be /describe.openapi, and it will return a properly formatted OpenAPI payload to describe the services of a particular either one service or the entire catalog. So only thing is that a typical Fusion apps pillar will have hundreds and hundreds of services, so it could be a pretty big file, but should work okay. So that is possible. With the same feature that Jason demoed against Spotify, since OpenAPI is a standard, Apex knows how to recognize the metadata that's described in that OpenAPI standard wherever it's from, as long as it's adhering to the standard correctly. I think that's all the questions I see.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Steve, for helping ask the question and discussing it. And Jason, this has been an amazing example of new features in Apex 23.2. Myself, I can't wait to use static application files and object storage, but I myself have one question I'll put you on the spot with again.
Sure.
Since Paige demonstrated the upload image, is there going to be a way at some point to upload directly to object storage instead?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I don't think we put the safe harbor slide up, but it's a safe harbor. It's on the radar. Yes, that would be a great feature.
Excellent. Well, it's been very exciting to have you all here, especially thanks to Paige and Jason Straub for being on to talk about these new features. We're at the top of the hour with our questions. We've got many of them. Thank you everyone for joining with us. We really appreciate it, and pay attention to the new office hours that get promoted for our next sessions that are in general. This will conclude the Apex 23.2 new features and the preview series, and these videos will be published as soon as possible on our office hours page. So with that, everyone have a great day, and we'll see you next time.